timeline for a new cannabis market to evolve into a more mature, enforcement-heavy market tends to look something like this. So first, usually the regulating body is focusing on licensing and creating a regulatory framework, which also includes public comment periods. And this could be multiple sets of rules and regulations with multiple sets of public comment hearings, so that way the public can give feedback on the rules and regulations. During this time, or right after, usually a state seed-to-sale traceability platform is then introduced. Next, regulators start inspecting ownership structure, entity structure, and sources of funding. And then they move on to seed-to-sale with inventory control compliance and on-site compliance facility. And then finally, they start targeting tax collection and employment laws. So now that we have a pretty high-level overview of what the flow is from a newly licensed market transitioning into a more regulated or enforcement heavy type of market, this results requires that the cannabis businesses to operate like an actual business. This is because the violations that may have not been tolerated in the past are now not tolerated at all. So let's go into each one of these items so you can have action items, always to be proactive in your cannabis business with a comprehensive compliance program. Initially, enforcement is going to be in the honeymoon phase, if you will. During this time, unfortunately, operators assume that due to a lack of enforcement that their business is in compliance, which in reality, the regulators at this time are just prioritizing the rules and regulatory framework. But I promise you, your time will come. During this honeymoon phase, you should be studying other states. Try and identify what has worked for them, what has not worked for that state, and caused significant problems for the cannabis businesses or even to public safety. And take those learning moments back to your regulators during the public comment period. This is when you can shape your regulatory framework, so get involved and study the regulations. Some things to keep an eye out for: labeling requirements and who is responsible for what elements to put on the label and when in the supply chain. Also, take a look at testing protocols, inventory control, and how to receive investment into your cannabis business. These elements are usually the most important areas to focus on in the beginning of creating your state's regulatory framework. And after the regulatory framework is established, it's still not over. Be prepared for more regulatory updates in the coming years. The rules never stop evolving. Next, you can expect some sort of inventory tracking system or method for reporting of batch creation, your sales, and green waste reporting. This could look like in the form of submitting monthly inventory reports, reporting to the Department of Health, or requiring the implementation of a state seed-to-sale traceability platform like Metric or BioTrack. When it comes to seed-to-sale implementation, there is a common theme that I see here, and it's easier to implement a state seed-to-sale traceability platform at the beginning of a new market opening, rather than allowing a new market to open and operate and then implement a seed-to-sale traceability system, something like Oklahoma did, or California, or even Michigan. So make sure that when you're opening up a new state for adult use or medical, that really you should have some sort of inventory tracking system or method in the beginning of opening that market, and not require these cannabis businesses to implement in the middle of operating. It just becomes significantly more challenging. I've also seen states who do not implement a state traceability system and require like monthly reporting, usually will migrate to a state seed-to-sale traceability system because there is no transparency into how cannabis businesses are operating. And they do this specifically to help to ensure confidence with public safety and public health, also to help track diversion or inversion between the licensed cannabis market and the traditional cannabis market. The only exception I've seen here is the state of Washington. They have actually used 2 different state traceability platforms and regressed into monthly reporting. And if you ask anyone operating in the state of Washington, we all know it's a bit of a mess these days. Next, regulators start inspecting ownership structure, entity structure, and sources of funding. Essentially, they want to ensure who owns and operates the business are disclosed in the application of the cannabis business truthfully. While establishing your business, this is a critical element to work with a state-specific cannabis attorney. They are really the only experts who will be able to help you with this. Entity and ownership structure can be complicated to meet the state's statutes on how to operate within the cannabis industry. If you take anything away from this video today, find an attorney who is an expert in your state and has worked in the cannabis industry. Please, I beg you, do not go hiring Uncle Joe just because they're an attorney. You need a state-specific cannabis attorney to really help you iron out these details in your ownership structure, your operating plan, and overall entity structure. If you do not do this, this is setting your business off on the wrong foot and can lead to ownership structure problems, to tax write-off problems, and how to collect and pay your taxes. Just please use a cannabis-specific attorney that is an expert in the state that you want to operate in. So picture this. You're about 3 years into operating your cannabis business and think, I've only had a handful of on-site inspections and haven't had any problems, which is great. But just because there is a lack of enforcement does not mean you meet compliance standards. In the beginning, regulators are trying to learn and maybe be a bit more collaborative with you. But as the market matures, the regulators will begin enforcing more stringent requirements that are within your rules and regulations. And more than likely, by this time, the regulating body has also grown its team and maybe even restructured entirely, which ultimately gives them more resources to dive into your cannabis business. It can look like inspecting your inventory, surveillance records, business records, and maybe even bring in other agencies to inspect or investigate, like your tax collection and maintaining employment laws. So if you're looking for help to build a comprehensive custom compliance program in months instead of years, then join me for a live webinar where I break down the 4 simple steps to create, implement, and train your team in your compliance program. Just click the link below to register for the live webinar. I hope to see you on the other side.